There we go. And let me turn this off. I'm going to go grab a trivet so that I can rest this off to the side because I'm going to need that burner. I can rest this over here for right now until we're ready to use it. You do not need to coat your noodles in any butter or oil because when we make our sauce, it will have enough liquid that any noodles that are stuck together will come apart when it's time. Like they'll be coated in the sauce. Slide this guy up here. As we have these guys frying up nicely, I'm going to grab my other cutting board here. And we can get ready to prep up our stuff for our sauce. So we're going to dice up an onion and start to saute it. And then we're going to mince up some garlic. I have some fresh basil and then green onions. And we're going to kind of just make this really nice, lovely sauce using cream, Parmesan cheese, the minced up herbs. So it'll be a very light and creaminess. But we're going to add a little bit of lemon zest to it and the spritz of lemon juice, which will add a really brightness to it, which will be really delicious. So let me get this nice and diced. I want them to be nice little pieces because I don't want the onion to be overpowering in here. So I'm going to kind of give it a nice mince up right after this as well, after we've got a small slice on it. So that, you know, just like the garlic, you want these just little tender bits throughout, not too much of a bulk from it. There we go. And then I'm going to mince it. So we have these nice kind of small little tender bits in there. And then for our sauce, we're going to start the onions off in some olive oil, but we will add a little bit of butter later to add a richness. But I like the caramelization that kind of happens with olive oil more so than butter. So we're going to turn our heat. I'm going to have it, since this is a metal pan, I'm going to have it around a 5 because I don't want it too high because it conducts its heat a little bit faster and a little bit hotter. So you're more likely to burn it versus if you are using a non-stick pan. Let's get our onions in here. And then we're going to give this a nice little coat up of, and toss them around. Grab tongs. And just kind of mix them. There we go. And then we're just going to let these saute for just a second here. Let me check on my chicken, see if it's ready to flip over. Oh, beautiful. So we'll get this one. This one, we're going to let it cook a little bit longer because I want it to be dark reddish, kind of that color like that. This one's still a little blonde. So I'm going to actually turn and I'm going to move this part of my pan up here. We're going to give these about 30 seconds to a minute more. That should give us a slightly darker color on it. I like a richer color on my chicken versus a super blonde color. And we're going to mince up our garlic. Garlic is going to be a key component in this sauce, so we want a good amount. So I'm going to do a good handful here. And we'll mince it up. I'm just going to add, and I will say, fresh garlic is going to be the winner in this dish over garlic. Now you can definitely use garlic. It is going to be a bit more acidic and pungent in flavor, while this is going to be a bit more mellow. So we're going to mince it up nice and small, and then we'll let it toast up in there once our onions have gotten a good kind of brownish saute on them. Okay. Get this going here. And again, just keep it nice and small. You don't want super huge chunks because you will be eating this. And if you get a really big chunk, then you'll get a kind of like a stronger kick of garlic in it. So this will allow it to infuse out into our sauce a little bit more. Okay. That should be nice. Okay, let's flip these 2 pieces of chicken over. Much nicer. Beautiful. And we're going to allow them to kind of cook up nicely here. We're going to toss this onions around a little bit first. Beautiful. You see we got this nice little sizzle on there. I'm going to let them cook for a few more minutes before we add in the garlic. But while we're waiting on that, I'm going to turn this down a smidge to wash my hands. Let's start working on our our pepperkaka dough in here. So I've got my Dutch oven, and we're going to add our butter in here to start to melt. So growing up, this was a recipe that my mom, we always had kind of cooking on the stove. You kind of cook the dough in the pot, which is, I know, a strange way to do a dough. But then it sat on the counter overnight, and you just needed to sit for a minimum of 8 hours or so before you started to roll it out. So we're going to add in our butter, and you're going to just melt your butter into this pot. And once it's melted, then you're kind of done with your heat, but you want the warmth of the pot because it kind of helps the sugar and everything combine together well. So we're going to use a whole cup of butter, and I'm going to put my back burner on just super low and let it kind of start to melt. And once we have that melted, then we're going to add in our sugars. So we'll have brown sugar, granulated sugar, and dark corn syrup. So that is kind of something that's unique about this recipe, is the dark corn syrup. Let me grab a baking sheet here so that we can get ready to take our first batch of chicken out and get our next one in. I'm just going to rotate my pan, slide it right over here, see how it's cooking. Pretty good, just a little bit longer. We're going to put paper towels on our thing. So you don't have to use the paper towel method. I love the paper towel method because then I can use these paper towels to help clean up the excess oil at the end. But you want something to allow the chicken to cool and absorb fat. So the paper towels will absorb any of that fat that drips out, the oil, after you've taken it out, which allows it to stay nice and crispy. You could also put it on a cookie cooling rack to allow it to stay crispy with a tray underneath to catch any of the drippings. Just don't put it on a flat surface. Otherwise, where it touches on that flat surface is going to make it soggy. Now, paper towels will absorb it so it doesn't get soggy, it gets nice and crispy, just like with bacon. Okay, our onions are getting this nice, lovely saute on here. So I think we're ready to throw our garlic in. Looking gorgeous. And we're going to put in all, this is about 1.5 tablespoons of freshly minced garlic. And let me get a little bit of butter here. Let's grab a new stick, because we're going to use this for our base, but I like to cook the garlic to infuse into the butter. Make sure your pan temperature is not too high because, again, you don't want to burn your garlic. You want it more to infuse into this butter. And it smells wonderful. Okay, while that's melting, I think we might be ready to take our first round of chicken off. So let me slide this over here, get my little lid out of the way. Beautiful. Now, you see a nice golden thing? You want to put it oil side down on your paper towel. This is going to allow it to soak up that extra grease on it and make it more crispy. There we go. This guy would. There we go. Here's, again, beautiful golden brown. You get this nice amber color from the paprika in the mix here, which just adds, again, a great savory flavor, makes it so delicious. Let's get our next round of chicken in here to kind of crisp up. And coating there. Again, I am cooking this on about a 4. So it is a medium low, but the oil is nice and hot, and that allows it to cook evenly through. So it cooks all the way through that chicken while preventing you from burning that crust, which is really, really important because you don't want to burn your outside and have raw in the middle. So whenever you're frying something, go low and slow. Here is our garlic and our onions. You can see they're starting to infuse up. We have this nice kind of golden caramelization on it, looking gorgeous here. I'm going to give my back burner a little bit more love and heat. We're almost there with that. I don't want to boil my butter, but I want it to simply melt. Once it's melted, then we will add in our sugars and stuff like that. But while we're waiting, we can chop up our fresh basil here that we're going to add into our pasta sauce on there.
Yeah, second. What cooking oil do you use?
So I use olive oil, but on my pan, that's a mixture of olive oil and butter for that, because I like the butter flavor in the sauce, but I like how olive oil cooks onions a little bit nicer. You can kind of saute them at a slightly higher heat, where butter has the milk solids, which will burn if you go too high with it. And then for frying my chicken, I also fry it in olive oil, but I make sure I typically like to keep my oil right around 350 degrees. That gives you a perfect golden fry, so the oil's not too hot. And again, just makes it, I think, just like a perfect kind of cooking blend for it. And I like the flavor on it. Okay, we've got some fresh basil here. So we're going to mince up our fresh basil that we're going to add in and let it saute. I'm going to use some of it in now as to season up our thing, and then some of it will go as kind of a garnish later. But we want it all chopped up both ways. There we go. So get this nice and minced, beautiful. And the reason, again, you don't want to just throw it all in now is basil is one of those delicious herbs that while cooked, it lets out flavor, but it's also wonderful added as a garnish because it's not super potent. So we're going to put about half of it in now and let it saute to get more of that rich flavor out. And then we'll add in some more in a little bit too. But looking good. So that little stir, we're going to let it kind of infuse out those flavors, give it a little bit more richness.
Yeah, have you ever thought about being a professional chef?
You know, I've always thought about it, but my thought is I really love cooking and I have a lot of passion for it, but I don't think I would enjoy it if it was like in the restaurant world where you have like the pressure of getting food out and, you know, all the critics and stuff like that. So I enjoy it for doing it now, but I don't know if I would enjoy it if it was my job. Plus, you know, I already have to deal with my critics right now, which are my kids, especially Evie. She's a tough critic. I'll put that right here. Okay, my butter right here for our cookies is all melted. So I've got it. I'm removing it from the heat because I don't want it to continue to cook. We'll slide that over there. And let me clear up just a little bit of this room. We can mix in our sugars for this on here. So let me grab my brown sugar and my granulated sugar. We're going to start with 1 cup of sugar of our granulated. We're going to mix this into our melted butter. There we go. And then we're going to do our brown sugar, and we're going to use 1/2 cup of brown sugar. We're going to use just regular good old, it doesn't need to be dark brown sugar because we are going to be adding dark corn syrup to this. So we need a whole 1/2 cup. Make sure it's firmly packed. Packed it too firmly. There we go. And essentially the heat from this butter and the residual heat from this pan is going to help this sugar kind of dissolve and just come a little bit nicer together here. And then we're going to add in 3 tablespoons of dark brown sugar and our spices. And those spices will really come out with this heat as well. Let's get this going here. Let's give this, I'm going to turn this down nice and low. And then let me see if our chicken needs to flip here. Let me grab another tongs and a spatula because I find sometimes it's just easier to flip with a spatula. Beautiful. Perfect. And then I always like to, because I have found that my pan always cooks a little bit hotter up here, I just rotate it a little bit and we'll let those kind of crisp up. Kind of perfect timing on everything here. Okay, we're gonna let that sizzle, let those flavors come out for a little bit. Let's get our spices in here. So we're gonna be using cinnamon, cardamom, ginger, and oh, that one's empty. Nutmeg, no nutmeg, I believe. Let's see. And cloves. Where are you? Right here.
You have a question. Do you memorize all the recipes?
For the most part, I have them completely memorized in there. I do have to review them every so often. This is a recipe I make once a year, so I went through and I reviewed it because the original recipe is in Swedish, which I know very few words in Swedish that I've learned there. So I kind of have to go through and get the translation. And there's kind of, we've tweaked it over the years to make it like American customary measurements versus like the metric ones because they use like deciliters and everything. So it is something that we definitely like, I'd go review over. But if it's something like my chicken or, you know, chocolate chip cookies, some of those things, those I have memorized off the back of my head because I have made them so many times. Like my homemade pretzels, there's some that I have just completely memorized or the base of a recipe memorized. Okay, let's add in 3 tablespoons of dark corn syrup. This is the only time of year I use dark corn syrup is for these cookies. And I always like to do a little bit over because it doesn't all come out when you kind of shake it here. And then we're going to mix our dark corn syrup in, which will give it a nice kind of rich color to it, which just makes it absolutely lovely. And then we're going to add in our spices. We have cardamom, cinnamon, cloves, ginger. The nice thing about this one is it's like a teaspoon of every single one. So I'm just making sure I've got this all incorporated first. And then let me check my chicken here, but let's get our spices in. So, and this is the one where I'm going to tell you your spices need to be fresh because if they're not, you're going to need to use more of them. And it might be spices like cloves. You typically only use once a year. So just make sure they've got a good potency, otherwise add a little bit more. So a teaspoon.
And what kind of cookies are you making?
These are pepparkaka, which are Swedish spice cookies or Swedish gingerbread cookies, although they're more like a spice cookie. So a teaspoon of cloves, a teaspoon, and I like to do a heaping teaspoon of cinnamon because I feel like cinnamon is one of those spices that you can go more on, and it adds a little bit of more punch, but not a lot. A teaspoon of cardamom. And then a teaspoon of ginger. And the thing with that works so well with this is this butter and sugar is nice and hot now, which means that these spices are going to infuse a little bit better into the cookie over just the quick bake because these cookies bake up in like 5 minutes. They don't take very long. You roll them out really thin, and so they bake really fast. But allowing the spices to really sink in, especially with this little heat here, infuses their flavor a bit more. Okay. Let's get this mixed around. Let that sit here for just a second while we work on our chicken and our sauce.
You have a couple questions about cardamom. What does it taste like?
It is a very unique flavor. And I'm trying to say, I don't know if I can tell you if there is a spice that is similar. Even my husband is like, there's no spice similar to it. It is, you'll find it in a lot of European like cooking and cookies and desserts. You know, there's cardamom cake and lots of things, but it is, again, it's a very unique flavor. It plays really well with, I feel like the Christmas spices in there, but I don't know if I could explain it to you. It is difficult because it is so unique on its own. I absolutely love it. My husband is not a huge fan of it, although he doesn't mind it in the pepparkaka because it's masked by some of the other flavors. But I think it's just so delicious. But there's like you can make little butter cookies, like cardamom cookies that have it in it, and it's so lovely.
Is it sweet?
It plays well with the sweet, but it's not like sweet like cloves or cinnamon. But it plays well in sweet things. My husband just disagrees because he does not like it at all. I mean, sometimes I add cardamom to shortbread, things, or like a butter cookie on there. I mean, let me see. I'm going to smell it and see if I can get even more. I don't know. It's cardamom. Like I can pick it out and everything, but it's similar. I would say there's like a little bit of similarities to nutmeg, but I'm not sure. Not too much though.
And where can I find your recipes? And are you cooking Christmas dinner live?
We will definitely be cooking our Christmas dinner and our Christmas Eve dinner because we do 2 special dinners live. They might be in parts because our Christmas dinner is a crazy feast that has, I mean, I'm cooking duck, ham, Swedish meatballs, Johnson's potatoes, salmon. I mean, it's a feast. It's a multi-course feast. So that one we'll do throughout the days. And then tomorrow we do a rib roast with a bunch of little things. So we will definitely be kind of cooking parts of it or showing it and streaming it as we go. For our recipes, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so you can always recreate these recipes by watching them. I do send out recipe cards for our members a few times a month for them, using some of the recipes that we've made on there. But for everyone else, you can find them from our link. We're going to add in some of our starchy water here, kind of mix it up, do little by little, because we're going to add in some cream as well, but I like to kind of deglaze with the starchy water. There we go. And give it a nice little thing. Let me see, check. I must have bonked my thing over here when I walked by, so it got a little bit higher. So let's see if they need flipping. I had it on a 6 instead of a 4. Good thing we checked it because they're ready to go now. That's the one thing with knobs. Sometimes I'll swing by them. Okay, let's sit in here. I'm going to add again a little bit more of our starchy water. We'll let it simmer and cook up. Don't want to just flood it, just add it in things, let it simmer, kind of infuse out those flavors for it. While we're doing that, let's get our next kind of part of our cookies in here. Now we're going to need to add in our egg and our baking soda. But again, just look how beautiful this is. It's giving you that nice, rich kind of color to it. So we're going to add in 2 tablespoons, or not tablespoons, 2 teaspoons of baking soda. And then we'll add in about a half a teaspoon of salt. So let's get those. We're going to mix it in, and then we got to mix in, and we got to beat up an egg and then mix it in. So half a teaspoon of salt, and then 2 teaspoons of baking soda. One, 2. Mix that into here. There we go. Okay. Let's get our splash of cream in here with our starchy water. Kind of thicken it up. Let's give it a good swirl here. And then since we're going to need to add a little bit of garlic salt in here because we didn't add any salt to our pasta water, but we want to add a little bit in here. So about a teaspoon or so, good shake over. And let me get my zest for our pasta. So we're going to add in some lemon zest. This is going to give it a nice kind of tangy lemon flavor, which is going to work really well with the garlic and the onions and the basil. You don't need a whole lemon, like half of a lemon, because lemon zest has a lot of flavor, especially when you heat it up. So don't go too overpowering on it. Let me give that a little stir. Perfect. We're going to add a little bit of Parmesan cheese in there to start melting up, and then we'll pop in our pasta because we're almost ready. Our cake is going to be ready here in just a second, and there we go. So I've got some shaved Parmesan here. I'm going to just sprinkle it out in kind of sheets so it kind of melts up nicely. And again, we have our heat on low, so we'll do it. Let's see what our chicken looks like here. Good. I think we're nice and done with this. We're going to add that over here. And we'll give it a good little shake. And we're going to add it into our pan. Got to rearrange these because we're running out of room. I'm going to turn off this. Perfect. Okay. As that's simmering, we're going to finish up our thing over here. So let me grab a small bowl because we're almost done with our dough. And then you just let it sit. And then our cake has about 1 minute left on it. So we'll take that out here. So kind of perfect timing. So you want to make sure your egg is well beaten before you mix it in here because once it kind of hits that, it is warmer in there. So we'll kind of cook it a little bit. So we've got 1 egg well mixed. We're going to pour it into our mixture.
You have a question. What's the best way to get rid of the leftover oil?
So I use the paper towels that my chicken are sitting on to soak up that oil. And then that kind of base way to use it. And then I throw it away because you never, ever want to pour oil down the sink. Ever want to pour oil down the sink. Not that I have ever done that, ever. Hot water does nothing. It coats your pipes. So don't do it. Trust me, guys. I know, some crazy people out there. Okay, we've got our egg mixed in here. Beautiful. And then we are going to add in our flour. But our cake is our cake is kind of sounding at us. So I'm going to turn this down real low so that it can simmer. And we'll get our cake. We'll make sure it's nice and let me grab a little stick. You don't need a toothpick. You need a skewer. They work the best. I think they're done though. I don't even know if I need to do a skewer because they are popped up. Let's see. Yeah, actually a few more minutes, but almost. Let me do the back ones. They're not the easiest to manipulate here. Okay, back ones are pretty much done. So let's rotate. And see, when you get them for the kids, you're going to cut the tops off so that they lie flat on the ground. And what I do is I get actually a little piece of cardboard. Let's do 2. I need 2 mittens for this, but at least a little piece of cardboard that I cover with aluminum foil. And then you put a little pat of frosting down and it holds your cake on it. But that way they have this nice kind of base for it. Here we go. I will say these need like a few more minutes. So by the time we plate up, they'll be able to come out. But that's why you always check. So I'm going to put 5 minutes because I think that's all they need because those back ones are almost there. So about perfect. Okay. We're letting our cheese melt and simmer. We've got this mixed in. So let's slide this guy over here. And now is the fun part where we mix in our flour for this. So you're going to use all-purpose flour. You don't need a cake flour or anything like that. I've got it over here. 3.5 cups, but don't all add them in at one time. Start with 3, and then that last one, you're just going to add it until it holds it. I feel like these cookies, because they're kind of a translation from a grams over to the US customary, if you've overfilled your cups or whatnot, they can make them too dry because it's a fairly sensitive. So start with 3 cups, and then your last half a cup, you're going to mix if you need it. Because again, you don't want a super dry dough. And you can add up to a tablespoon of water if you need to add it to kind of help, but it should be fairly good. And it's going to cream together and it's going to come together just like a regular cookie dough. So you want it to be kind of a nice thick dough, and then it actually will get even thicker as it cools. And mixing it. You see how it's coming together, and it's just absolutely wonderful. Here we go. And what I like to do before I go and try to do it, I grab it and I feel kind of like this. So I feel like I need a little bit more in there, but not much. Like a fourth a cup more. Because again, when it cools, it's going to go together a little bit, but you want it to kind of mix together very nicely here. But you don't want it to be with too little or it's going to give you a runny, really crispy cookie. Here we go. And remember, as it sits, this dough is going to hydrate more. Beautiful. So this is right about where we want it. Okay, make sure I mix it here. Now, what I always say with your hands, you go in with your hands, you're going to form this all into one big ball. Squeeze it together right here because you want to make sure everything from top and bottom gets mixed. And then you can see we just have this wonderful dough. And then what you're going to do is press it firmly down. And then you cover it with plastic wrap and then the lid, and it sits on your counter for about 8 hours or overnight. So growing up, we always had it sitting overnight, and then we would always come in and lift up the lid, steal a little bit of the dough, and put it there. It needs to sit because those spices infuse. You also want the dough to come to room temperature kind of thing so that it's easier to roll out. So we've got our dough there. And see, the nice thing is I got my little Christmas pot. So you've got this cute little Christmas pot that goes there. Okay, let's get this show on the road. Let's add, I got our cheeses melting here, so it's nice and low. We're gonna add in our noodles. So don't worry if they're stuck together. As soon as you touch them with this sauce, they will fall completely apart as they get coated up. You can see that Parmesan cheese in there, just coating it up lovely. Beautiful. And then we're gonna add in a little bit more Parmesan and our fresh basil on top, and our pasta will be ready. And then we're gonna be ready to serve up because our cake should be done with this. Okay, let's grab our fresh basil. We'll sprinkle our fresh basil in. Remember, we added half of it in there when we did our first time, and then we have our second half now. Give some more fresh. We're gonna add a little bit more Parmesan cheese. We'll mix that in with our tongs. Let me wash my hands up. And look, perfect, because we have about 30 seconds left on our oven, and we'll get ready to transfer those over here. So kind of coat it up, but you see just how wonderful and delicious this is going to be. Okay, let's clear this off because we're going to be ready to bring our Tomte cake over here, and I want a nice spot to put it because it's going to be nice and hot. And then I'm going to actually grab this to transfer it on. It will be a little bit easier. But let's go grab them. That way I can carry this instead of 3 Tomte cake. 6, yes. 3 molds, 6 cakes. Much better. Okay. Nice kind of firm tops. I'll slide these out. Now you do need to let them cool down before you flip them out. If you flip them out now, while they're still hot, they haven't loosened up, they can kind of tear a little bit. So just let them sit there and come cool down. Also, it's very, very hot, so they'll be difficult to handle if you do it that way as well. But you can see how the cake kind of pumps up over the top, and then you just kind of cut those tops off. And if you're really crafty, you can use the tops to make kind of like a gingerbread cake pop. Use that dough in there. But we have our cute little Tomte cakes. They're upside down now, but then they'll be ready to decorate later. Okay, let's get ready to serve up our lunch here. So let me grab a little cutting board out, and then we're going to serve up nicely. Okay, and a plate. And I've got my little shovel here. Okay, guys, for lunch today, we have our lemon, garlic, and basil pasta. It's in a nice creamy sauce that has sauteed onions, fresh garlic. Look at that wonderful cheesy Parmesan cheese. And we are going to serve that with our crispy fried chicken that we season with herbs de Provence, garlic, salt, onion powder, and black pepper and panko breadcrumbs. And then, of course, we'll add a couple shreds of our Parmesan cheese to the top. We made our cookie dough, our Swedish pepperkaka dough, which we're going to leave in our pan to sit for at least 8 hours or overnight. And then we'll roll them out. And then, of course, we made our Tomte cake that are cooling here, which we'll be able to decorate instead of a gingerbread cake or a gingerbread house. We have Tomte cake that decorate. And one of these has the little Tomten hiding in it. And whoever gets that gets extra luck for the year. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page and search for what we made. Our tomte cake, our pepperkaka, or our pasta and chicken, and you can watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. So you can always go there and search for, our pans, our knives, our cutting boards, all the different things that we have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.